In today's video, I wanted to share an interview that I did with my friend Ted Bushman, aka JamesAfloat. Ted created a mod of Fallout New Vegas, a popular role-playing game from 2010. Ted's mod is based on add-on content for the game called Honest Hearts. Honest Hearts centers around a character named Joshua Graham, who was a former Latter-day Saint missionary, but joined a quasi-Roman empire and became a bloodthirsty general, only to be betrayed by his leader and burned alive and thrown into the Grand Canyon. Honest Hearts Reborn, Ted's mod of Honest Hearts, delves much deeper into themes of faith, personal change, and redemption. Ted created this mod entirely by himself, not only writing the dialogue and the story, but also programming the characters and the quests without any previous coding knowledge. The only thing that he had any help with was a full cast of voice actors to voice the parts, of which I was one. I finally played his mod this last year, and I was extremely struck by it, and I knew I wanted to have a conversation with him about it, not just to talk about the game itself, but about the fact that he made it at all, considering how absolutely gargantuan a task it was. I sat down with Ted to ask him about his experience creating the game, its themes, and how it was received. Spoiler alert, there were a lot of trolls. So without any further ado, all-access exclusive interview with JamesAfloat,
We could get
noted
so
hater
much
of
more
player
hate.
choice.
I think I have been given a glimpse of my life, as if suddenly shown a tapestry,
Joshua.
as if a light has been turned on in a room that was dark.
Everyone is telling me that I need to leave, that I should give up on you. But I know you. You're my best friend.
Where I thought I was alone, I am surrounded by souls. Where I thought myself powerful, I am blessedly weak. For the strength of God is made perfect in my weakness.
Joshua is the reason for my son's death. He was special, you understand?
Where I thought there was chaos, there is a pillar of fire and the hand of the one true God.
I will find him. The burned man will die.
These forces we have gathered are children, as David was, but let the legion be Goliath. We will show that the battle is the Lord's, and that He was the one who was weaving the tapestry all along.
Joshua.
Walk me through the story of Honest Hearts Reborn.
So Honest Hearts Reborn is a mod that retells the original DLC for Fallout New Vegas. So in that DLC, you're following the story of, specifically, it's very focused on the figure of Joshua Graham, who is from the base game as this lieutenant to Caesar, and his story is very interesting. But the narrative of Honest Hearts Reborn changes it from you coming to Zion, your caravan getting attacked by essentially natives. They're not Native Americans because they're people who had survived who sort of took on these ways. And then you end up sort of essentially getting embroiled in like a big conflict with them, and Joshua sort of becomes involved, and you have to say like, oh, are we going to be peaceful or are we going to be jerks? And what are we going to do about killing Native Americans? My story that I told in Honest Hearts Reborn is the courier comes to Zion, gets kidnapped by a group of Legion who are there in Zion for some reason. They're not there in the original. And you realize eventually that they're looking for Joshua Graham. And you find him, like the first moment in the original, when you find him, he's doing this like animation, which a lot of people thought was very cool, and where he's like picking up the guns, and he's like checking them out and doing stuff with them, and then puts it down. And it's this sort of infinite stack of Browning pistols that he just like keeps reloading and putting down. And in mine, you find him sitting on a lawn chair on top of Angel's Landing, like coughing himself to death and being like, oh, all right, are you going to kill me now? And instead of this story about this sort of warlike guy continuing his zealotry just in a different vein,
I am the right hand of the Lord, and the instrument of his vengeance.
he is this very broken individual.
Where I thought myself powerful, I am blessedly weak.
who is uncertain about his future and what he wants to be and like what he wants to do with himself after everything that's happened. And so instead of making a basically binary decision about who you're going to fight, you meet a bunch of different factions in Zion National Park, and you learn about all of their history with Joshua, because all of them have history with him, because I make it that he was a missionary there before he came back there. And you eventually sort of guide him through what you think he should do with the rest of his life. And there's sort of essentially three choices. The first is that he just tries to get revenge on Caesar, and he sort of like, at the end, if you do that, he sort of joins this like motorcycle gang of disaffected Caesar's Legion guys who are going to go and kill Caesar, though nothing happens with that. I didn't change the base game. And then there's another sort of neutral-ish option, sort of Buddhist option, where he just sort of accepts what's happened to him, kicks everybody out of Zion, Canaanites and Legion, and decides to just live with the tribes for the rest of his life, a little bit like Ammon in the Book of Mormon. Or he then rejoins his people and his religion in the Canaanites, because there's a delegation of new Canaanites who have come down to Zion. So that's sort of the general arc of the story. There's a lot of characters who also get put into those, a bunch of people who Joshua converted to the gospel while he was a missionary, the Sun and Moon tribe, a group of very tall super mutants called the Highlanders. And there's also, he had an effect on the Locked Horns tribe, who aren't really into religion, but they love Coca-Cola. You also meet all these figures in the New Canaanites have their own interesting backstories. There's two other companion characters, Zoe and Brutus. So those are both other characters you engage with in the story. That's sort of the general story of Honest Hearts Reborn.
Awesome. So now walk me through your story of how this thing got made.
I was working on a cruise ship. I was like playing in a bar on a cruise ship and like doing shows. I only had to work for like 40 minutes a day. It was a cushy job in a lot of ways, and like a really unpleasant job in a lot of ways, just because I didn't really have a lot of connections out there. And I played a lot of video games. It was hard to get enough internet to download something at any good speed, and you had to pay for every like minute of internet. It cost 5 cents a minute. And so get into the port, I'd get on the free Wi-Fi there and like sit there for 6 hours downloading a game, and then like crawl back to my little like cabin, my windowless little cabin. So I played Fallout New Vegas for the first time, and such a deep world, and just so clearly deserving of all of its, this big community that was built around it. I think I had outlined Honest Hearts Reborn before I was finished playing Fallout New Vegas. I played the original Honest Hearts DLC, and I was like the whole time I was like, this ain't it, fam. That's because, that's me and how I talked in 2014. I was just like, no, there's something here that I wanted to get that I didn't get. Anyway, so that was the first part. That's sort of pre-writing. What is the biggest, best thing you could make to tell this story? This is a journal entry that I wrote. Fallout New Vegas is about rigged games. Benny starts off, it may seem like you're having a run of bad luck. Truth is,
the game was rigged from the start.
The game was rigged from the start, which is a fantastic opening line. And I sort of took this as this is the thematic center of the game. So all of us are a part of these rigged games, doomed to lose in different ways. Lily the super mutant lost before it started. She was torn up by the Master's will, just like Boone was by Jeannie May and the Legion's evils. Vegas isn't about outcasts as much as dealing with a rotten hand. And so I was interested in the idea that all of these companions in the game connect to this theme, and I was excited about that idea of doing a big party RPG where all of the characters interact with the central theme. That kind of journal entry, half personal exploration, half game design, was really indicative of that period. And then I was just so fascinated by this Mormon figure that immediately I just feel like I jumped in on all right, I'm going to make a mod for this, and I'm going to make it about Joshua Graham. I, at the time, often described modding as the best working example of socialism, which is a very weird thing for me to say about it. But people love video games, and they play them, and the games often have stories. And some of these games come with tools that allow other people to make content for them. Because the thing is, with a movie, you can't splice in a scene that you made. You could, but it's not as built in that they don't ship movies with video cameras for you to record your own scenes. But with games, they do. They'll send out, these are the tools we used to make this game. If you want to make stuff for it, as long as you don't sell it, boom, have fun. Honestly, the best equivalent is fan fiction.
But it's fan fiction that you can glue into the binding, right?
Yeah, yes.
For
yeah,
other
it becomes
people.
a part of the
Yeah,
fabric of it.
yeah.
Yes, you have content creators whose stuff is as prevalent in the game as others. Like I think of Inigo, the companion for Skyrim. Like so many people have played with him as a companion, and a lot of people see mods like him as essential for the gameplay experience, which is insane. So what's crazy about this, and so amazing as a concept, is that you can, through sheer force of popularity, render your thing canon. Both the consumers of mods and the creators of mods perceive it as, I think, some sort of service. Like there are like donate buttons, like on Nexus. It's like, hey, you can donate and like basically pay this person for this if you want. I've never heard of anyone doing that for anyone. I think that people aren't doing it for that. Like it is just this purely creative thing, in the same way that fan fiction is.
Up to that time, you had written books and plays and...
Yeah. I'd written lots of dramas. I've written a couple books. I'd won a playwriting award in college, which I then like put onto the mod page, which was also ill-advised because people were like, award-winning? Who's this piece of crap?
Okay, so it's like, I'm going to try this, how hard can it be?
Yeah.
So how hard did you think it could be?
I thought... Man, I don't even think about that crap. I never consider how difficult it's going to be. I'm just like, this will be this much writing and this much stuff to do. I just had a lot of free time on that ship. And so I think I was like, yeah, I'll make a mod. I'll do it. I didn't have a microphone. I did not have the beginning of a hint of programming experience. I had never done anything like that ever in my life. Starting to program it, starting to learn the programming language, starting to learn the creation kit. The impression that I have now and had at the time was, even if you do this right, the creation kit sucks and the engine in which Fallout New Vegas runs is buggy garbage. I have so many things still in that game. Like, there's a facial bug that Brutus has, the character, where like he's got this little bit of geometry that sticks out of his cheek, which I'd never seen in the base game in any circumstance, and which just showed up in his voice lines. I even made a duplicate of his character and started plugging all the dialogue into it, and the bug migrated. And I'm like, how is this possible? And there's another bug where, this bug annoys me so bad, is that there's Camilla and Carrie, who are these pair of sisters in Zion, and Camilla is one of the only merchants in Zion. And one of the complaints that like I honestly am like so on board with that people have had about Honest Hearts Reborn is it doesn't have a good economy. Like you just run out of bullets at some point, and you're like, where do I get more of these? So I was like, all right, she's gonna be this merchant character, and no matter what I do, I duplicated her as well. I've done all this stuff. You interact with her as a merchant, and she's like, here's my wares, and it's one bottle cap.
I remember.
Great. Just let me get out my ledger.
In the game.
Like, what am I supposed to do with this? She only has.
Here's what I got.
She can't sell you anything. She can't buy anything because she doesn't have any money. It's like, it's brutal.
Oh, man. I think I texted you. I'm like, is she supposed to have stuff? Is this commentary on, like, how destitute this game world is? It's like, you're lucky you found a merchant with a bottle cap.
Yeah, you're freaking lucky. Be grateful. No, oh my gosh.
Oh, so funny.
Yeah. Yes, it was. It's so silly. And so that was, like, that. So those kind of bugs would just... They would show up and they would never leave. I mean, the big thing in terms of process is nav meshing. So nav mesh is the way that NPCs know where they're allowed to walk. And so like you basically have to make little triangles that on the 3D map of the world, and you make enough of them and it allows people, NPCs can walk there, and like, so you don't put a rock there because they'll collide with it or they'll get stuck inside it or whatever. So I literally just sat there for like months on end, just like making little triangles by myself while I was programming this, recording the vocals, and programming the entire thing. It's terrible. It's terrible nav mesh. There are whole sections that don't have any nav mesh at all. I essentially like basically only nav meshed the main quest. Like everything else, like I'm like, meh, maybe your companion will follow you. We'll see.
The sense that I have about nav meshing is that it's basically something that no amount of time that you could possibly put into it will make it seem polished and professional. And yet you have to do an oceanic amount of it to even make the game functional.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
the floor
yeah, and
the floor is like a mile high, and the ceiling is just like up in the at like Alpha
stratospheric,
Centauri
yes.
or whatever.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. And I was just doing it utterly by myself. So yeah, it was that was a huge problem. And like honestly, considering how imperfect it is, I have had way less comments than it deserves for how bad it is. Like people are like, "This is terrible nav mesh," and I'm like, "Oh, you don't know how terrible."
It's like you treated that guy really poorly. No, I killed that guy and buried him in the backyard.
Yeah, no, I did not raise my voice at him in the Wendy's drive-thru.
Yeah.
I dismembered that man.
Nav mesh. Nav mesh. You gotta fix the nav mesh. Thank you. There you go.
So my memory is we had been roommates in college, but then when you were on the ship, I feel like we kind of reconnected and we started like Skyping or whatever was available at the time. I remember you telling me, "Oh, and I'm working on a mod," and I'm like, "I don't know what that is, but good for you." So you're making a game? Well, no, I'm not making a game. I'm making a mod of a DLC. And I was like, I don't know what a DLC is. And you're like, it's downloadable content. I'm like, okay, I don't know what downloadable content is. So you're spending all of your time on the ship taking something that someone made that adds to a game, and you're changing that. And that's what you're making? You were pouring all of this time into something that just like could not possibly be more niche. And now I understand like mods and that there's actually a very thriving mod culture. I just distinctly remember just being like, Ted, this is not a good use of your time.
Which, you were right.
Well,
it was not.
Well, was I though?
I moved back to New York after my contract was over, and then immediately started just like moving in on this. And I didn't have a job for much of that year. I was sort of living on the money that I'd made on that cruise ship. Just worked on this all the time, every day, and often for like 6 to 8 hours a day. It got to the point where I just like programmed enough stuff that I was like, well, it's sunk cost at this point. I'm just doing this thing.
Yes, the law of the sunk cost. If you've already got sunk costs, you gotta justify them.
Yep, that's what it is. The number one thing that made it actually happen is that I had to record voices, which means I had to cast people, which means I had to get my friends involved, which means I told them about the project and told them about the roles, and they got interested. And I love working with people. And I honestly, the most fun part of this whole thing, and I don't just say this because you were one of them, is it was working with people recording the vocals and like doing directing this thing. Like that was such an exciting process. Summer of 2015, I was getting people to come over and record stuff all the time. Jamie Nelson, who played Legate Levius.
Before you came, it was a matter of months. Now it is a matter of days.
Amazing actor, way above my pay grade, who I met. He was in a show on Broadway with Ethan Hawke. Came in one evening, recorded all the Legate Levius dialogue. And he was so nice and generous because he came to my house with, all of these actors came to my house, and the microphone, there was like this little slanted bookshelf, and the little audio recorder was on it, and I would just like hand them the paper, press to record that, and I would be holding coat hanger with pantyhose put over it as a pop filter.
You had to. You destroyed a pair of your own pantyhose.
I had to put my own sweat, blood, tears, and pantyhose into this project. The fact that any of these people delivered any of these lines with anything resembling a straight face is so absurd to me now. Now that I like actually, have a microphone.
Yeah, as we can see.
There were 17, I think, total actors who worked on the project, if I remember the number correctly.
I understand that you actually flew as far as Utah to record some of these lines, to find actors to record these lines. Is that true?
The thing is, what we needed was the best. We needed people who could deliver.
and you cannot find the best on the coasts.
Yeah. Where are you gonna find them? New York? L.A.? No, you're gonna go to Kaysville, Utah. That's where you're gonna go. You're gonna go to Kaysville, Utah, and you're gonna get Jordan Call to voice Nonus.
My name's Nonus. What happens next is that you come with me, or you die.
And the Locked Horns chieftain, whose name I don't recall.
I'm a cool dude, but I like run this tribe.
It's so funny, like, players who encounter this game, because they're like, you know, you're talking to all these natives, and they'd, like, have all these, like, sort of accents a little bit, and then you meet the Latorans, they're like, dude, I could really use a Nuka-Cola right now.
Dude, I could use a Nuka-Cola right now.
It was a choice, for sure, at least.
yeah, it was a choice that I'm still so pleased with. Like, if there are choices I regret from Honest Hearts Reborn, that is not one of them.
I had always kind of wanted to try voice acting. So you're like, hey, I'm going to be in Utah, and I'm making this mod, you remember? And I'm like, oh, yes, I remember still making that. And you're like, I'd like you to voice a part. And I was like, this would be a really fun thing, is trying voice acting. And this was my first opportunity to ever do it, and probably last. And so you showed up with your microphone, and you get your laptop out, and you're like, read this. And I'm like, okay. And it was the first one. You're like, this is a real rough, tough kind of whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like listening to myself do it. And I'm like, I don't have the voice for this. Like, I don't have the depth and the resonance in my voice. I'm like a high tenor, and I'm trying to like, hey man, I'm like, I sound like a teenager playing like Daddy Warbucks in the like junior high school play, you know?
I blind the eyes that should see us coming. I remove the tongues that should cry out.
So anyway, I remember kind of thinking, well, maybe he'll fix that in post. You did not fix that in post.
I pitched it down, but it wasn't enough.
You actually pitched it down?
I remove the tongues that should cry out.
Yeah, it's totally pitched down.
That's hilarious, but also what's funny about that is that's why I didn't recognize myself when I heard myself, and I'm like, who's this guy? And then I'm like, oh, that's me.
Yeah, well, and like, there's like several examples of just like, there were people who were willing to help me, and there were roles that needed to be filled. Yeah. You know, I can do nothing but give profuse thanks to the people who did them,
right?
Even though the internet will give them nothing but scorn,
right? Yeah.
People like the Latorans, yeah.
Yeah, so that I actually I'm still proud of, and I mean, you were like, oh, they're like, I can't even remember what the direction was, but I'm like, can I just do like a surfer accent? And you said, okay, and so I did, yes. And that was like, yes. that was more of the kind of thing that I'm suited for, as like a character part, you know? And so I did this like, dude accent, you know, just like, where's my car or whatever. Yes, and it like, I feel like it plays.
You know what's the best? Guns. Also, like, hiking. You know what's the best? Guns.
I had a blast doing that, and I have always appreciated you giving me the chance to
my gosh,
try to do voice acting.
It was so fun.
And I remember again just being like, man, he's doing this. Whatever it is, he's doing it. And now I'm part of it. I just did some of it. And I remember just being like, well, I'm interested to see what happens with this.
I tested it with a bunch of people. Like, a bunch of people played it, and I just like played it all the way through 100 times myself.
How many hours do you think you estimate you put into making the game?
I think put it into the like multiple thousands of hours. I think it probably never broke 2,000 hours, but it's certainly was at least 1,000 hours of work. Over a year and change.
Wow.
It got to the point where I don't know if there was ever a point where I was like, this is ready to see the light of day. It was the point of like, I will die if I work any more on this, and I cannot do anything else.
So you put it out. You got sick of working on it, and you put it out. And what did people think?
There was the big original surprise was, oh, there's a lot of people who are looking at this, like tens of thousands of people. And this is crazy
to me. Hold on, this is crazy to me because this game at this point is 5.5 years old.
5 years, yeah.
And there's still a vibrant enough community. You're getting tens of thousands of hits on just, hey, I'm a guy who made a mod.
And it got featured. It got featured on the front of the site in its first
really?
week. The first responses, there's a lot of hopeful ones. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, like, I always thought, and I said this a lot, was like, I always thought that Honest Hearts was the weakest of the DLC, despite Joshua Graham being so awesome. And then over the next, like, 2 months, essentially, people learned that it was a buggy mess. And then, yeah, lots of people got real mad about it and were real jerks. And, like, that's where, like, the whole saga of this has been, like, just one long belch of critique against this, like everything this mod and I stand for. I've learned that there's some guy who I don't even know who has a reputation for getting angry whenever my mod gets mentioned. So like he always like comes onto Reddit and raves about how terrible it is.
So what percentage of the responses do you think were generally negative, were like a thumbs down?
It would be hard to evaluate, particularly, for one of the reasons being that I got rid of most of the comments I didn't like.
Nice.
Because I had control as the mod author of the page to just be like, deleted. I would try not to delete comments that were actually engaging with problems of it. Like I would try to respond to those and be like, hey, this is a solution that others have found. Or more often, I don't know. That was more often what my response was. But yeah, there were a lot, a lot of those that sort of happened over time. And I think in terms of the ratio, I think it's probably 60-40 negative, like maybe even 70-30 negative. Wow. But yeah, like I don't know. There's been a lot of negative responses, and even the good ones are tinged with bad of parts of it.
It strikes me that you started making this mod because you played this DLC and you went, this isn't doing it for me, right? Yeah. And when you think about it, it's like a AAA team of hundreds of people created what's considered to be widely to be one of the best games, at least put out by this company ever.
Definitely up there in like top 10 role-playing games.
Yeah, of the genre even, and still beloved. Yeah. And like, we look at that game and we go, oh, these games are buggy misses. And we go, oh, this DLC kind of sucks. It's just kind of shallow or whatever. And it's like, oh, well, we worked really hard on it. It's like, I don't care. It's not good. What's it like being on the other side of that? What perspective do you get from this? Like you poured your heart and soul into this for free. Like at least those guys are getting paid. What are you getting out of this? Publicity? Well, just vitriol?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right to frame it first as like this is a point about sympathy for game developers. What's so hilarious to me is that as a modder, by so many people on the Nexus, you are held to the same standard as teams of professionals. And, a lot of people didn't know that it was just me. Like, a lot of people are like, JamesAfloat and his team, whatever. I'm like, there is no team. There is no I in the team. Because I am just the I. You are on the team. All the actors are on the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just hilarious, honestly. Like, to the point where, like, it's been 6 years. And, like, for the first 3 years, I would just, like, get so frustrated with people. And I would, like, get in these big fights. There's, like... the other thing that got all this interest was I have no idea how you say his name. Alchest Breach on YouTube. He's one of the big Fallout YouTubers. This dude named Daniel started a petition that Alchest Breach should play Honest Hearts Reborn, and it got 102 signatures.
Wow.
I think. Yeah, which I'm like, I don't know. Be the change you want to see in the world, man. Like, let's start a petition so this guy will play my mod. So Alchest Breach played through this whole thing, which like just perfectly revealed the game as it is, I think, in so many ways. Like, because he's just like having a good time and making jokes about everything and anything he can, and is hilarious. And I'm trying to make this like very serious literary thing inside this game. I feel like the mod just goes full force to be as buggy as it possibly can on his behalf. Very big narrative design of like this moment that leads you up to meeting Joshua Grant for the first time in the mod. He does the whole thing. And he, like, I don't know if he says hello to Joshua or what, but Joshua like stands up off of the lawn chair, looks back at him, turns back, and walks off a cliff and immediately dies.
Good luck.
Thanks. Ooh, this is pretty nice. Don't fall. Don't do it, Joshua, no! Oh, Joshua, no! Oh, no, Joshua! Oh! What the f***, Joshua? Oh, no!
And I'm like, that's my boy. That is my son. I have created this mod.
Where did his body even go? Oh my god. Joshua, you idiot.
It's a very serious literary mod.
The whole game is like he's the linchpin. Like everything else you do, for everything you do before is to meet him, and everything you do after is to like influence his narrative.
Yes, it's about him.
He's just like, excuse me, while I kill myself.
I'm out. Yeah, this is like
that's so funny. Oh
yeah,
man, at least he wasn't on fire this time when he fell into the canyon.
Yeah, exactly.
This is just how I get out of awkward situations at this point.
Yeah.
I fell down the mountain again. Sorry. See you later. I played it. So you had to come over at some point and download it on my computer, and you bought me the DLC so that I could play this game, and I still did not play the game. I think it was. I started Fallout New Vegas. I did. I started it, and I just couldn't progress. It was too not casual of a game for me at the time. At the time, like I don't think I even knew that like the compass would lead me to my next thing I needed to do. So I'm just like wandering in the desert and getting killed by scorpions, you know? So I really did give it like a college try. Finally, last year, I was like, all right, I'm gonna try this again. I think I'm ready for it. Then I started playing the game and I was like, this is a great game. Like I was really into the game itself. So finally I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready to do this. I'm gonna go into your game. And when I went into your game, I forgot about the rest of the game. I was so sucked in to Honest Hearts Reborn, and it was a very uncanny experience for me. One of my companions at the very beginning, you start out, like somebody's like, hey, we're gonna go through this pass, would you mind coming with us? And you say yes, and that starts the mod, and then you just like go to sleep and wake up and you're in the mod world, you're no longer in the old world, your map's different. And then I'm being confronted by this guy, and I'm like recognizing something about it. I'm like, okay, Ted's shown this to me before. The voice is kind of dumb. The lines, I feel like I remember these lines. I'm surprised I remember this. And I freaking realize it's me. I'm listening to me.
It's your own voice.
Yeah, that was very strange to be confronted by myself so quickly into the mod. I was just a teeny part of it. Just your ideas and your thoughts and every part of the game is just you. So it was very interesting to experience that. I had a very fun time with it and was very impressed because I remember, I'm like, he just made this like on the ship. Like I remember that. I'm like, how did he do this? Like knowing you personally and knowing the scope of it, I'm like, this isn't a possible thing to have accomplished as a person. No. It was really a stunning achievement. And then I went and I read some of the comments on it from 4 years ago, and I'm just like, people are being so unfair to him. Like, what is happening here? This is like a towering achievement for a person to have created. And people are just like, this isn't what I would have made. No, it's not, because you wouldn't have made anything. You wouldn't have made anything. One funny thing that you can comment on is people didn't like the character of Joshua Graham. Your whole idea was, there is more potential in this character, and I'm going to bring that out. Everybody on the site, it acts just like it was offensive to them that somebody would take something that they kind of liked and change it. You know?
I think if, like, there's a YouTube comment like on the first video of an Alchest Breach that's like, look at what they did to my boy, look at what they did to my Joshua.
Seriously?
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, yeah, there's so much of that. Like so many people who are just like so displaced. What I was interested in was, you have this guy, Joshua Graham, who was like a Mormon missionary, a post-apocalyptic Mormon missionary, who then joins a movement that is this like militaristic reconstruction of the Roman Empire with slavery and misogyny and all the classics of Rome, and then becomes this like bloodthirsty general for 30 years, fails at the Battle of Hoover against the NCR, and then Caesar, to make an example of him, burns him alive and throws him into the Grand Canyon. And I'm like, that is an arc. Holy crap. Where do you go after that? Like, what is your experience. Like, also, why do you go from being a Mormon missionary to being this general? Like, I'm like, that is such an interesting thing, especially for a Mormon to write, a non-Latter-day Saint. Like, that was such an interesting and engaging thing for me. And the thing is, like, you meet Joshua Graham, and he's basically like, in the original DLC, and he's essentially sitting there with his guns going, yeah, like, now that I, like, burned alive, I joined my faith again, and they let me in, let their prodigal son, it was pretty good, and, yeah, like, God's always there for me. And I'm like, who are you? What is your journey? What is going on here? Like, what matters to you? Like, why did you make this decision? And, like, why did you just go back so immediately? And I this is a person who has made this dramatic transformation in terms of who he is and what he decided to believe.
More than once, and often,
right? More than once, yes. Wouldn't it be cool to just be able to see that thought process and to experience that thought process as a player, as opposed to meeting this guy who's just already made the decision? And so that's exactly like the narrative I wanted to engage with and wanted to explore, and to allow the courier essentially gets the chance to, you get to decide for him. He basically says, convince me of who I should ally with. And so the other angle is like from a perspective of a believer, is I was interested in engaging with the way that the divine can give you moments to reckon with who you are and like the impact you've had on the world. Zion turns out to be this like It's a Wonderful Life, this like very twisted post-apocalyptic It's a Wonderful Life, where Joshua gets to see all of these people he's affected in all these different ways, and sort of has to reckon with this question of who he wants to be in the wake of that. And so all of that thought went into that, and then it's just this hilarious result where people just hated him, and so many critiques of him, and that's the stuff that bothered me the most, I think. But what was a shame was that so much of it wasn't criticism, it was just like, he's lame now.
We're both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so I knew a lot of people of faith, and I see their struggles, right? I see what's difficult about being a person of faith, and what's rewarding about it. So for me as with that background, I'm like, oh, here's somebody of my faith, and I'm getting some like actual literary treatment of his journey. I just really, really appreciated that, and I wish there was more of that. This is by far your most viewed or right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
Of anything that you've done, I would think.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question.
It is as the farthest reach of anything that you've made, I would assume.
Yeah, no question.
Can you brag a little bit about some of the stats about it? I mean, how many downloads did you get?
So it's been endorsed 1,600 times. It's been unique. The unique downloads has been 27,800, so nearly 30,000 downloads, like from unique stuff, and then 70,000 total downloads. The page has been viewed 300,000 times, which is insane. The videos, the trailers have each been viewed, I think 10 or 20,000 times a piece.
And then
the
videos that playthrough guy, how many views did those get?
Breach. I mean, he did it in 14 parts. Oh, and then each of those got 100,000 views. I recently discovered that there's a TV tropes page for Honest Hearts Reborn. Like, someone went in and made this like 3,000 word analysis of Honest Hearts Reborn in terms of like tropes that it engages with, which is like honestly, I could die happy right now. Like, having someone analyze my work to that level is shocking. One of the craziest things that happened with this mod is that my friend Jackson was a young convert to the church in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. He joined a congregation where my parents were, they were also in that congregation. Became friends, and he eventually decided to serve a mission. He's just a ridiculously smart person and talented writer. At one point, like, reaches out to my dad and says, did your son make Honest Hearts Reborn? The mod? I was like, and my dad reached out to me, and I was like, wait, what? You played Honest Hearts Reborn? And he like played it right before he went and served a Latter-day Saint mission. And I don't know to what degree it was deeply meaningful to him. You'd have to ask him. But like, I think it was like a meaningful experience. Yeah, it's and the more I get away from it, the more I can just kind of chill about it and just see how hilarious it is. And like, people are mad about it. But the reason that people are mad is because the Fallout New Vegas community is incredibly passionate, and they understand, I think, that modding is a way of adding to the canon. And so yeah, like even if it's hilarious that people are like, this mod should not exist, as if we're like as if I've like got this hose and I'm forcing Honest Hearts Reborn down the throats of anybody at all. Like, you know, even though that's ridiculous, you know, it's amazing the way like the Fallout New Vegas community cares about this community and this world. And I'm just honored to be among such great and passionate nerds. Like, you know, I don't know, I love them all. They hate me. So many people hate me. Even with the angry discourse and like the dumb discourse that I got frustrated with, the fact that people are talking about it is so exciting.
Yeah.
Like even when they're critiques, I love the fact that it's a work that anybody would care about enough to engage with.
Well, it's a pretty interesting thing to have done. Not a lot of people can say that they've done this specifically, of course, but even just put this amount of time into a creative project and put it out into the world. And it's kind of interesting because I have this YouTube channel now that I've been doing it'll be a year in like April that I released my first video, but I started my first video in February, I think. So I think it's been about a year since I've been like doing this a lot to absolutely no acclaim. You know, at time of recording, I have I think 251 subscribers. I don't know that it'll ever get very much attention. I do enjoy just the creating, and I do enjoy when some person that I've never heard of stumbles upon my video and it's like, whoa, this is really thoughtful, or like I laughed out loud, or whatever. You know, I've gotten these occasional things, and it's just like, I don't think it's so much that I just like love being complimented necessarily. I wanted to reach out and put my ideas out there, and I wanted them to connect with people. And even just little instances of that when that happens is like really gratifying as somebody who loves creating, because I've engaged with so many other people's ideas that have really connected with me, and I don't want to just be on the consumer side of that. I want to be on the producing side of that, you know? Because I feel like you and I have been brothers in this enterprise for many, many years of like shouting into the void our ideas. Right?
Yes. Getting to some grandiose point, like getting to the point where I'm like, you know, running my own fantasy show running for HBO or whatever. Like the best parts of those experiences that I could have, I've had making Honest Hearts Reborn. You make things, people hate on them, like a lot of people hate on them, because that's like the majority of the bell curve, like people who don't care or people who hate. And you get like the really meaningful responses of people getting like understanding what you experience. It's like, I think if you can find a way to, as an artist, get to some people who care about it, it's incredibly lucky, you know. And I think that's the real dream, and that's the future of the democratized kind of content creation, is that you don't need everyone to like your stuff. You need to find the niche of people, because I think true art is pretty divorced from commercial success. There's one like anecdote I want to share that's unrelated to any of this.
Yeah, please do.
One of the best critiques of Honest Hearts Reborn, this vitriolic person who is like, Ted Bushman or JamesAfloat has absolutely betrayed everything that Obsidian stands for and ruined their entire design philosophy. JamesAfloat hates player choice. Because of like, you kind of railroaded into the opening sequence. Like, you can't kill all the Legion people and leave the camp having murdered them all. Like, it just ruins the rest of the plot. Yeah, and so now Carson occasionally every few months will text me and he'll just be like, hey Ted, I have a question for you. So why do you hate player choice? Thank you so much, Jordan.
This has been super fun. I've always wanted to, we've chatted about this, but I've always wanted to just get the like beginning to end sort of story. I think we're about done. So thank you so much. It's been super fun to chat with you. And I guess, I don't know, I'll splice in some better ending at the end, but
Nonus doesn't sound like the hardened killer he's supposed to be. Instead, more like an edgy, soft-bellied teenager. Is it just me, or is there something ever so slightly camp about about the voices and mannerisms of these particular legionaries. Why do mod authors always try to do voice acting themselves? Such awful voice actors. The voice acting makes me die with cringe. I hate this voice acting. The voice acting is pretty, yeah. Voice acting is kind of hit or miss, but to be clear, none of it is bad. Hard disagree here. Very little of it is really good. A lot, mostly the female voices, is decent, and a lot is truly awful. Most of the male voices, big, tough Legion killers, super mutants, even ghouls, sound like pencil-necked teenagers. They all have the gravitas of the fast food kid from The Simpsons.
Sorry, but when a 7-foot-tall, 350-pound super mutant, or Joshua Bloody Graham, has a voice that makes me think he's going to put his hand on his hip, sip his frappuccino, and squeak, "Those shoes with that outfit, it breaks my immersion."
Dude, I could use a Nuka-Cola right now.